Okay, now second story, page 202. How ropes are recycled. Now here again we have at least three stories interconnected. One story from the Vinaya, and the other two are from the commentaries. Let's look at the first story. The first story on page 205. The story of the 500 ropes. This is from the Vinaya. The Vinaya is also full of stories. Now, at that time, the Raja Udena, here we have another king called Udena, he was amusing himself in the pleasure garden with his concubines, the women of the palace. Then the Raja's concubines heard, "It is said that our teacher, Master Ananda, is sitting at the foot of a tree not far away." Then the Raja's concubine approached the Raja Udena and said this to him, "It is said that our teacher, Master Ananda, is sitting at the foot of a tree not far away. Your Majesty, we wish to see Master Ananda." Well then, see the recluse Ananda. So here is a story. You have this king, Udena, is a young king enjoying life. He's got many women in the palace. And Ananda regularly teaches the women in the palace, teach Dhamma to them. This king is also a very Dhamma-minded king, but he's a young king, so it's a bit playful and romantic, if you like. Then the Raja's concubines approached the Venerable Ananda, saluted him, and then sat down at one side. Sitting thus at one side, the Venerable Ananda instructed, inspired, roused, and gladdened with a talk on Dharma. So these women are so happy listening to Ananda. There are 500 of them, and they're all wearing double robes. The inner robe and one outer robe, okay, to look very nice, keep themselves warm. They're so happy, and they got nothing with them. They probably have jewels with them, and you don't give jewels to a monk. So he gave this robe, each of them 500, gave the robes to Ananda. So Ananda's got 500 robes. And then the king came back, they came back to the king, and the king noticed they're only wearing one set of robes on it. The outer robe is not there. Okay, so this is 13.3. Now Raja Udena saw his concubine returning from afar. Seeing the concubines, he said to them, "Okay, have you seen the Venerable Ananda?" And he says, "Yes." And then he says, "Did you give anything to the Venerable Ananda?" And then the women say, "Yes, we gave 100 robes." So this king got a shock, and he said, "My goodness, what's one monk got to do with 100 robes? Why does he need so many?" So remember, he's a young monk. He's not that devoted like King Pasinadi. So he says in the last line, "How can this recluse Ananda accept so many robes? Is the recluse Ananda becoming a cloth merchant? Or is he opening a store?" So he was a little upset. And then he went to see Ananda. And then he exchanged greetings with him. Okay, so now he asked Ananda, "Why do you need so many robes?" 14.2. He asked, "Master Ananda, what did they give you?" So Ananda said, "Well, they gave me 500 robes." This is how the conversation begins. But, okay, who's talking here? The king is talking now. "But what is Master Ananda going to do with so many robes?" The Ananda replies, "Maharaja, we distribute them to monks with robes that are worn out. Those monks whose robes are old, we give it to them." Then the king asks, so this is a series of, it's called a question cycle. "But Master Ananda, what then do you do with the old worn out robes?" Now he's a king, so he's thinking about money and numbers for a while. So he said, "Okay, so this monk with worn out robes, they're given new robes. What happened to the worn out robes?" Ananda replies, "We turn them into cover sheets for covering furniture and so on." "But then, Master Ananda, what do you do with the old cover sheets?" "We turn them into floor sheets or carpets, if you like." "Master Maharaja, what then, Master Ananda? What do you do with the old floor sheets?" "We turn them to covers for pillows and mattresses." Right? We kind of just put over pillows and mattresses. "And what do you do with the old pillows and mattress covers?" We turned them into foot towels, right? Foot towels, that means used for rubbing the feet and so on. And then what happened to the old foot towels? We turned them into dusters. In other words, use them for, here the note 19 says for cleaning rags. Then the king asked, what do you do with the old cleaning rags? Maharaja, having shredded them up, torn them up into pieces, we knead them into the mud, and then we spread them out on the floor. The king got no more question, of course, after this. So the king thought, these recluses, sons of the Sakya, proceed very wisely. Nothing is wasted. So the Venerable Ananda, so he gave Venerable Ananda another set of 100 robes, okay? And so that day Ananda got 1,000 robes. So this is how the story of recycling, this is the first story I've ever known in history of recycling. Now, of course, this is a beautiful story. It's on Vinaya. It's probably the oldest version of those 3 stories. You find this, that's used for all the robes. And you see this being used even in the monasteries in Thailand and probably in other countries too. The question now is this. Why is this story told? Okay, this is called a critical approach. Okay, if you are just a traditional Buddhist, oh, this is nice, you just stop there, you see. But we must also think in terms of context. Why is this story told? When is this story told? What is it really about? What does it mean to us? Of course, what it means to us is ecology, recycling, not to waste things. That's definitely good. Now, obviously, this story did not happen during the first part of the 2 periods of the Buddha's life. If you remember, the Buddha taught for 45 years, right? So after studying the history of Buddhism for so long, I thought we can divide the 45 years into roughly two parts. I call it the first period, second period. The first period is from 10 years to, say, 20 years, more or less. That's the time when the monks were really forest monks, and they all were arahats. And it was just to teach them, and then they get awakened, and the Buddha said, "Come, O monk, ehi bhikkhu," or "Ehi eta bhikkhave." They become monks without much rituals, but they were great saints. Teachings were very simple, no structured teachings, no Four Noble Truths, no Eightfold Path, very simple, few lines here, few lines there, because these monks were all ready, they were ready to get awakened. Then the second period, the last 25 years more or less, the Buddha allowed the monks to ordain other monks. In other words, even though they are not awakened, some of them are not even keen on religion, they just become monks to eat nice food, or have regular supply of food. Buddha still allowed them to join, because at least they will not do bad things in society. And under the rules of Vinaya, they are all restrained. So this kind of story obviously would be in the second period, when there were a lot of monks. So this kind of story is in the Vinaya, notice that. It is to remind the monks how not to waste things, how to treat the robes properly. So it makes sense that the story comes during that period. Now then there are other longer versions of this story. Take for example the second story, Samawati Watu. Now you notice in this first story we are not told who the queen was. But in the second story we are given the name. We know from the second story that the queen is called Samawati. Now she's a very famous queen. Her story comes in the early part of the Dhammapada story. It comes from the longest story in the Buddhist literature. It's called the Udena cycle, King Udena. How King Udena won his various queens, and Samawati is one of them. Samawati, I think, is the second tragic figure in Buddhist literature. The first tragic figure is Atachara, if you remember. Atachara, who lost all her family in the same day. But Samawati, she was murdered by a jealous queen. Okay? See, Samawati was a very religious person, very devout to the Buddha. The story goes like this. King Udena first married a very proud, beautiful woman called Magandiya. Magandiya is very interesting because before she got married to the king, she was very proud. A lot of princes and rich young men come to woo her. She doesn't want to marry any of them. Then one day, she saw the Buddha. And she told her father, that's the man I want to marry. The Buddha said, you must be crazy. I mean, no one marries the Buddha. The father says, you should not think like that. The Buddha is not the marrying kind, But the child, she's very persistent, said, no, I want. So the father had no choice, talked to the Buddha. Then the Buddha said, no, you know very well, I'm a renunciant, I don't marry, Then the Buddha said something in a meditative way. He says, I won't even touch this body with a stick. Okay? There are some strange words in the story sometimes to dramatize this kind of teaching. For example, the Buddha says, I would not touch this body even with a dipstick. I'm not going to tell you what a dipstick is, you find out for yourself. So what he's saying, this body, for those who meditate, this body is so impure, we are not attracted to it anymore. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think, in Buddhism we hate the body. It's not that. It's just that a meditator who is celibate, who doesn't have sex, have the kind of attitude towards the body, so that they don't fall in love, they don't get attracted to the body. That's the meaning, okay? And this is what the Buddha was trying to convey. But this woman, being very proud and young, she said, so this man has jilted me. She got very upset. She didn't tell anyone, but she bear a grudge in her mind. She said, one day, I will seek my revenge. So finally, she decided, well, since I can't marry the Buddha, let me choose the next best person. So she decided to marry King Udena. And when Udena applied, so to speak, for marriage, she said, okay. All right, so they got married. Then this king, he has, I think, at least 4 main queens. So the second one is Samawati. Samawati is one of the kindest queens we know. She has this servant, called Gujutara, hunchback. This hunchback, every day would go to the market, to the shop of Sumana, the garland maker, buy flowers back to the queen. But this hunchback, she was a little greedy, you see. The queen gave her some more money, so half she kept, half only she buy flowers, But the queen doesn't know. So every day the queen sees flowers. Then on that fateful day, the Buddha came to town. The Buddha was in town. And then she saw the Buddha. I mean, if any of us see the Buddha, we probably will really feel a sense of, wonderful religious feeling. So that day, she was so happy. She says, who's this wonderful person? It's the Buddha. And you might say her good karma ripened. She says, this is wonderful. So she spent all her money buying flowers and let me throw all these flowers on the Buddha, Then she's so happy, she doesn't mind what's going to happen to her. She goes back to the queen. She told the queen, I'm sorry, I spent all your money, I bought flowers and I threw it over the Buddha because he's such a wonderful person. And I also want to confess to you, I've been using half the money for myself and the other half I buy flowers for you. But the queen was not angry with her. The queen said, you say Buddha? So the queen also was surprised. So this is where the moment these people hear the word Buddha, is the karma ripens. Because to know that the Buddha is in the world is a wonderful thing. That means you can learn the Dhamma. But then, the King Udena, he's very, possessive. He doesn't allow the queens to leave the palace. So, Queen Samawati instructs Gujutara, says, can you please, every day, just go to the monastery, listen to the teaching, and then come back and instruct us. She became like a reporter, in a real sense of the word. So every day she goes, listen, and so on. And the wonderful thing is we have a record of these teachings. This forms one of the 15 books of the Khuddaka Nikaya. This book is compiled by a hunchback, a woman hunchback. Do you know what's the book called? Do you remember the name of the book? It's called Iti Vuttaka. Iti Vuttaka, thus said. So the teachings that she remembered were compiled. to one little, small little book. It's not a very thick book, very small book. Smaller than Dhammapada, in fact. So she goes every day back and forth, listening to Buddha and then coming back teach Samawati. In the end, she became a stream winner. Samawati also became a stream winner. You know, this is the happy story. Okay. Yes.
Who's Samawati with respect to
the queen, the second queen. Second
wife.
Second wife, yeah. Yes. Correct. Okay. So now, remember the first queen, the bad queen. So she said, "Oh, this Kujutara is a devotee of the Buddha." Now remember, she got this grudge, you know. So she says, "Now it's my turn to take my revenge." So she plotted all kinds of things. She tried to hurt the queen, you know? And so in the end, the king was not very wise. So the poor Samawati, in a sense, you know, got into trouble. But the trouble did not come from the king, because the king loved Samawati and did not punish her. See? So this, the first queen, Magandia, she got some, she bribed some hooligans, so they closed the palace door of the Queen Samawati and they burned the palace down. So Samawati and the 500, remember the 500 maidens, they were all 500 all together and they gave the robes to the Buddha. So they saw the palace burning. And then Samawati told the other, her handmaiden, she says, "Do not be upset. This is the time to show metta, show your loving kindness." So as the fire burned, she just went into loving kindness meditation and they all died in the fire, all the 500. Because everything was closed so they couldn't get out. So they all were killed by Magandiya, the first queen. Then now the king, of course, was very upset. So that the king wanted to catch the other culprits. How should I do this? So the king pretended, you know, not to like Magandiya. He says, "You know, this is wonderful." He said, "You know, somebody has been kind to me and got rid of this queen, you know, who's not devoted to me, but more devoted to the Buddha," something like that, you know. And Magandiya got the message, you know. She thought, "Oh, I know, I made the king happy," you know. She actually told the king, "Well, I'm the one." So then the king got hold of her and punished her. She died a terrible death. She was put to death. Kings those days were terrible. So here you see a story of how this Queen Samawati, although she was going to die, she said, "Show metta, don't be upset." She didn't panic. And then the person who killed her got punished within the same life itself. So the Samawati is the one who gave with the handmaidens, who gave the 500 robes to the Buddha. Then, so here you are, back to the story. So the 500 robes were given, this on page 207, and each robe is worth about 500 pieces of money. And then section 9. So the king was told that Ananda took all the 500 robes. The king then approached the elder, saluted him, and then asked him about the outer robes. That's the robes given to him, that had been given to him. And hearing that he had taken them all, said, "Bhante, isn't it a great number of robes? What will you do with that many?" Ananda replies, "Maharaja, having kept as many as we need for ourselves, we will give the rest to those monks whose robes are worn out." "What will they do with their own worn out robes?" Ananda replies, "They will give them to those whose robes are even more worn out." So notice here a slight variation. Now, so the question now is, how can the story vary a bit? Because the previous one is a Vinaya story, and this one is a commentator story later on. Remember, we're talking about a time when there are no written records. So all these stories are word of mouth. So sometimes there are variations, slight variations. So here, the second robe are those, the robes are even more old, so changed. And then what do you do? The robes which are very old, they will make cover sheets of them. Then what do they do with the old cover sheets? They make floor sheets or carpets of them. Then what do they do with the old floor sheets? They make foot towels. And then the old foot towels, they plaster the walls. Okay, so notice there's a variation in the last one also. Here in the Dhammapada commentary, they plaster the wall. In the Vinaya, they plaster the floor. Right? What's the difference here? It is possible that the Vinaya story was recorded in India, but the commentary possibly maybe in Sri Lanka. That's one possible explanation. Or another explanation is the monks actually used for both floor as well as wall, because after all, the wall also needs plastering. They use clay, you see. So if you reinforce with these torn pieces of cloth, it strengthens the floor and strengthens the wall. So both, in other words, you put this together, you get a fuller storyline, in other words. Okay? But there is something a bit difficult to explain here. This is really a commentary almost Mahayana in spirit, section 17. The elder, it is said, then receive, not that, should be then, just remember this correction. Then receive 500 times cloth worth 500 each in batches of 500, placed at his feet. Having received 1,000 times batches of 1,000 ropes cloth, 1,000 each, placed at his feet. He received batches of 100,000 ropes cloth worth 100,000 each, placed at his feet. It is impossible to count what he received by way of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10, and so on. It is said that the Tathagata passed into Nirvana after the Buddha has passed away. The elder traveled all over Jambudvipa, all over India, giving his very own robes and bowls to the monks in all the monasteries. So as here you see, the communities start making the numbers very big. Okay? Okay, again you can ask, why? It's not just Indian hyperbole. By the time of the commentaries, there were many huge monasteries in India already. So they need a lot of robes. So one of the ways of telling people we need robes is to tell stories like this. So they introduce this kind of stories. So the stories reflect the time they were told. Big subtle monasteries with lots of monks and so on. I mean, obviously this story did not come from a time when the Buddha was a forest monk living alone. He doesn't need so many robes. So this is how we look critically at these stories. Right? And of course, this last part is not really important. How many thousands of robes, you know. The real spirit of the story is about the recycling. Yeah? And finally, the last story. Yeah? The last story is from the Jataka. So the starting point is more or less the same. The Ananda receives many robes, and then he's asked why there's so many robes. Look at section 9. Therefore I accepted the robes from which I gave to those whose robes are old. Okay? And then the old robes, they are turned into undergarments, something different, yeah? Sarong, in other words. Use a sarong. And then the old sarongs, the old undergarments are turned into cover sheets, and the old cover sheets are turned into floor sheets, and then the old floor sheets are turned into foot towels, and the old foot towels are torn up into pieces and plastered over the walls. Okay? So the commentaries, their story is always plastering on the wall. The Vinaya is covering on the floor. Yeah? So the king is very happy. The king gives Ananda another 500 robes. And then, so that is, story is very similar. No? But something is added here. Section 20. So the Ananda distributed the robes gave the robes to a young monk, and this monk distributed to all people in his monastery. There's a very interesting saying here which we need to know. Let me read to you section 20. He distributed all the robes amongst his own colleagues. He here is the young monk the Buddha gave the robes to. He gave to his own colleagues under the same preceptor. The monks who received these robes cut them all up and dyed them in the color of the cassia flowers, kind of yellow flowers. Girt and dressed, they went up to the teacher, saluted the teacher, and having sat down at one side, said, Bhante, is it possible that a noble disciple who is a stream winner make a gift by looking at the face? Okay, here is a little mysterious sentence which needs explanation. Before that, one more thing, the color of the robe. Notice the color of the robe here is cassia flowers. Cassia flowers is a yellowish, more yellow than orange actually. So if you talk of colors of robe, this would refer more to the monastic kind of robes. Whereas the forest monks, their colors tend to be darker, ochre, brown, and so on. So there's one point to note. Now, what does this what does this question mean here? Is it possible for a noble disciple, in this case Ananda, who is a stream winner, to make a gift by looking at the face? The meaning here, looking at the face, means I look at you, I like you, so I give you more. Okay? In other words, can a saint, or can a monk even, give someone something because of favoritism? All right? Then the Buddha replies, no bhikshus. A noble disciple who is a streamer does not make a gift by looking at the face. In other words, when Ananda gave the gift, it's not because of favoritism, because he knew this young man would make good use of the robes, and moreover, this young man is a very kind person. He was very helpful as a monastic person. So the Buddha, rather Ananda, gave the robes to him not because of favoritism. So this is a very useful saying. Not by looking at the face, not because I like you or because of bribery and so on. Then the Buddha says, for there's an ancient saying, one good turn deserves another. A very familiar verse here, right? Look at section 22. Because this young monk has been very helpful, but not just helpful to Ananda. As a monk, he's helpful to other monks. Now, one good turn deserves another is a very well-known English proverb. Now look at note 38. There's the Pali version of it. Attanu upakaranan nyena nyewa pachupakarang taring suti. Right? So in other words, he has been very helpful. So he got this reward in return because of his industry and kindness. And then this is an occasion for the Buddha to tell a Jataka story. Okay, so we'll close the study with a Jataka story. Now this Jataka is called a Guna Jataka, J157, right? In the past, when Brahmadatta was ruling in Benares, the Bodhisattva was born as a lion living in the hillside cave. Right? So the Buddha, many, many lives ago, was born as a lion. One day he came out of his cave and looked at the foot of the hill. Now at the foot of the hill was encircled by a lake. And then on the high ground, there is this solid mud bank. And in other words, there's a thick mud there, and then there's a bit of soft grass. So animals like to go there and chew the grass. A hare would come, a deer would come, and other light animals would go there to eat the grass. Now, that day, a deer wandered there to feed. So a deer went to that spot, that mud bank, to eat grass. So this lion, the Bodhisattva, saw this deer, so it's going to kill this deer for food. Okay? Remember, the lion's on top of the hill. So this lion rushed down. Lion can really speed, but because of the incline of the hill, this lion went very fast. But the moment the deer saw this lion coming, the deer, of course, panicked, jumped, and ran off. But this lion could not stop because of the momentum. So he went straight on, went into the mud, and all the 4 legs went into the mud, up to the stomach. So the poor lion was stuck there in the mud, couldn't get out. And for 7 days, the lion was stuck there. So, what happened after that? On the 7th day, a jackal came along. Okay, so, 27. So the jackal saw the lion. He got terrified. He says, "Oh my goodness, it's a lion!" So the jackal wanted to run away. You see? Then the lion said, "Master Jackal." Okay, the Jatakas, the animals can talk. No? He says, Master Jackal, don't flee. I'm stuck fast in the mud. Save my life." Then the jackal went before the lion and said, I will draw you out, but having done so, I fear you will eat me. I will help you, but after you come out, you eat me. The lion says, oh, I promise I will eat you. Yeah? In fact, I'll be kind to you. So please save my life. Yeah? So this jackal was very clever. It's okay, I accept your promise. So the jackal, first of all, dig away some of the mud around the lion, and then he used his feet to make channels to make water flow into the mud around the lion because it's a bit dry. And this lion softened the mud a bit, and then this jackal put his head under the lion's belly, push underneath, and then went under the lion's belly and stood up and carried him up, you see. So the lion managed to, the legs came out of the mud, and he washed himself, and he was free. So the lion was free, and he remembered his promise to the jackal. So, section 32, after resting a moment, the lion went into the lake, washed off the mud, having bathed and so was free from anxiety. Then he killed a buffalo, and sinking his teeth into it, tore out some meat, and said, eat, friend. So he let the jackal eat first, and then only he took his own meal. And then the jackal took a piece of meat in his mouth. And then the lion asked, what is that for, friend? The jackal says, oh, this is for a female slave. Actually, it's for the wife, okay? Then the lion said, oh, okay, take. Yeah? And then he himself took some meat for the lioness. So he's got a female lion in the den. So they both became friends. Then the lion said, come, friend, let us stay on the hill for a while. Then we will go to a dwelling place of our female friends. Having said that, they went there and let her eat the meat. Then he comforted the jackal and his mate, saying, now I will watch over you. So this lion said, I will take care of you. So in fact, the jackal shed a cave next to the lion. So they lived together as good neighbors for a while, happy together. No? Then you have a problem, The lioness, okay, before that, this lion and the lioness, they had cubs. The jackal also had babies, cubs, and they lived together quite happily. But one day the lioness got a bit worried. The lioness thought, why is this lion so close to the jackal and the jackal, female jackal? Are they having an affair? So here's the very human side of the story. Okay? So the lioness was very unhappy, a bit suspicious, right? So, but here, of course, you have a bit of a reflection of Indian women at the time. Okay, I don't think it's reflective of all women. So while the lion and the jackal were away, the female lion decided to resort to subterfuge, sabotage. No? She tell the female jackal, he says, you dare to live here for so long. This lion can be quite fierce. What's going to happen to you? Stay too long with the lion, and so on and so forth. So this pure lion got terrified. The female lion got terrified. The female jackal got so terrified. Decided to tell the husband, say, hey, we better leave. People don't like us if we stay too long. Okay? Look at 41, okay, section 41. The jackal, having heard this, went up to the lion, and before that, sorry. 39. So while the lion and jackal were away looking for prey, the lioness vexed and terrified the she-jackal. Thus, why do you live here? Why do you not run away? Her sons too terrified. The jackal's sons. 40. The she-jackal told the jackal about the matter, and she said, I'm not sure whether she has done this at the lion's bidding. If we stay here any longer, we might perish. Let us go back to our own dwelling place. The jackal, having heard this, went up to the lion. Okay, so the jackal was very wise. He trusted the lion, so he went up to the lion. And this is very important for us, You hear rumors, what do? Go straight to the source. So the jackal goes to the lion and says, Master, we have lived a long time with you. Those who stay too long become disliked. While we were away seeking prey, the lioness vexed the jackal. saying, "Why do you live here? Why do you not run away?" Her sons too terrified the little jackals. Whoever does not like another staying with one should simply say, "Leave now, go away," without the need of such vexation. Then he uttered the first verse. Okay, the Dhammapada verses, this is the first one. Sorry, Jataka verses rather. The first one. She dismisses as she desires. This is the nature of a powerful lioness. The one with sharp teeth. Know you this, that fear has arisen from refuge. So this is a refuge that brings fear. Right? Having heard these words, the lion said to the lioness. So now the lion talked to the wife. He says, "My dear, do you recall the time when I was away looking for prey and then came back with a jackal and she-jackal?" So now the lion is trying to explain to the lioness why he's kind. He says, "Remember I was away 7 days, It is the jackal who saved my life. So you should not treat her so badly." Then happily the lioness realized she was wrong. And then she apologized to the jackal and the wife. And then they became true friends. 45. He's able to stand in true friendship. He's no weak friend. So he says that this jackal is a true friend. So it's a story of friendship also. Right? Between the lion and the jackal. From now on, please do not look down on my friend, his wife, and his children like this. Having said that, he spoke the second verse. Even if he is a friend, not strong, he stands in friendship true. He is a relative, a kinsman. Notice, friends also regarded as relative and kinsman in Buddhism, in spiritual sense. As a friend is he and a companion to me. O lioness with sharp teeth, look not down on the jackal, my lifesaver. All right? This kind of teachings remind us of our Asian values. When you meet old relatives, sometimes they will tell you, "Please treat my house as your own. You're like a relative to me," something like that. This is how the old relatives, friends treat each other in a close way. And as Buddhists, we can do that with a community like this. As modern society becomes more and more alienated, more measuring. So these are values we can learn so that we live happily together as a community. Because if we don't, we'll always be looking at other religion. The community is very strong. For example, the Muslim community is very strong because of this kind of teaching. Right? To them, we like to say all men are brothers, but we often mean only the rich people are our brothers and sisters, right? Whereas you find generally, and I'm not saying all, generally among the Muslims, you find this brotherhood is very strong because they focus on this teaching. But the meditation tradition is not as strong. So in the Buddhist community, we must cultivate this spirit of brotherhood, sisterhood, especially in a community like this. This is a very rare and a very right situation where you can practice this kind of community. And once you practice like this, then people say, "Oh, this place, this SBM, they treat each other like relatives." Then this idea was spread to all the other groups in Singapore. And it's a really wonderful thing this can happen. And the world is becoming global now, so when other communities hear this, they follow your example. So this is the moral behind this kind of beautiful Jataka story. So finally, everything closes. When the teacher had brought this Dharma teaching, notice Dharma teaching, to its conclusion, he declared the truths and identified the births. At that time, the jackal was Ananda, and the lion was I myself, said the Buddha. At the end of the truths, some became stream winners, some non-returners, some once returners, some non-returners, and some arahats. It is according to the commentaries. And so the teaching ends here. Okay, questions?
Okay. Any idea whether the present time now, when do they recycle the book?
In the upcountry, I would say they do the same. If you really want to see how the monks really live happily, you go to upcountry, you go to Thailand, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, you go to the countryside, and you can see these monks living very simple. and they are more likely to practice the same thing. Okay, in the city, they will probably recycle it in the modern way. There are, for example, like what old clothes, they might do something to it. So, or to be more honest, I don't think it's so easy to practice within an urban situation. That is why the monastery usually are not built in an urban situation. They're built in a more like countryside setting, where especially a forest monastery, you find that everything can be used, recycled. They're so more likely in the countryside. Any other question? Yes?
All of the groups in Singapore, then now we have some model.
Yeah, that's right. You see, first of all, even within Theravada, there is a shading from darkish yellow to ochre, like brownish like that. Generally speaking, the forest monks wear more of the brownish robe, like the Burmese monks. The more orangey robe will be the Siam Nikaya, to which I belong in Thailand, and also the Sri Lankan order, the more orangey color. So I think this is because of tradition. They've been using this color for centuries, so they keep with this color. Generally speaking, those who wear the darker ochre color will be forest monks, generally speaking. Then you have the Tibetans, they use purple, or maroon rather. I think one reason is because of availability of color, of dye. The Theravada stories, in the Vinaya, for example, they would use some kind of bark from the tree, dry bark, and they will boil the bark. Like, in these fishing villages, they boil some of this, they call it bakau or something, this kind of dry bark, and then you get this dark brown color, and then they dye the ropes. One reason they have to do that is because many of these ropes they get from the what they call cemeteries, so they're in pieces. So they boil to clean the rope first, and they stitch together. You get an even color. Any other question?
Maybe there is summary, short summary between the Tibetan and Theravada.
Oh, okay. You see, after the Buddha passed away, Buddhism has kind of spread over much of India. And then during the 12th century, Buddhism started, adopting other teachings also. Rather, I say that many of the teachers also started adopting other teachings. For example, when you talk about Nalanda University, when you talk about a university, they are more open. See, open means they are allowing other influences to come in. So Buddhism, in other words, allow itself to be influenced by other teachings. The tantric teachings of the Hindus also came into Buddhism. So one aspect of Tibetan Buddhism is called Tantra. And this Tantra, some of the teachings, they simply convert from Shaivite Hinduism, the worship of Shiva. For example, the Om Mani Mantra is said to be the Buddhist version of the Om Namo Shivaya mantra. Okay? So what the Buddhists say was, they say, you got the mantra, I also can change it into Buddhist one. And again, for example, even Kuan Yin, you find the Catholics have got Virgin Mary, and the Mahayana got Kuan Yin. So it's hard to say who copied whom. You see, in religions, you can copy. As long as people believe it, you can't say anything. So it doesn't really matter who started it. And this is very common in religion. Okay? So here, where the Tibetan Buddhism is concerned, in Tibet, they believe in spirits. Spirits are everywhere. So when the old school was brought there, like the Theravada teaching, people just don't want to listen. They just don't find it attractive because they are so afraid of the spirits. Then they brought the story when the Padmasambhava went over there, started. Padmasambhava was like a magician, so they listened to him more because he talks about spirits and so on, and it is said that he converted the spirits of Tibet into Buddhist spirits. My understanding, the meaning is this. So what he did was, whatever gods, demons, or spirits of Tibetans have, they were given Buddhist names, Buddhist stories behind them. It's like the way the Catholic Church introduced and invented Christmas Day, for example. You know what I mean? because Christmas Day was originally worship of the return of the sun to bring warmth again. And people don't go to church and celebrate all this, what they call worldly kind of pagan kind of celebration. So the church was concerned. So the Pope declared, from now on this day, 25th, we will celebrate this in the church. So everybody has to come to church and celebrate that day, and he became Christian. And the Buddhists also were doing this. The Tibetans. So they changed all these local spirits, and they were given Buddhist stories. That is why the Dalai Lama had difficulties, one of them, because one of the protective deities of the Dalai Lama was a very fierce demon. So he's supposed to worship this demon. But he made a bold move. He says, this demon is not Buddhistic. So I'm not going to do any more worship of this. And he angered a few people because of this. And there was some very difficulties. But everything went right because he kept it quiet and so on. So now nobody talks about it. So he took the stand and says, I'm not going to worship this deity anymore because it's not Buddhistic. Right? So there is this very well-known, I suppose not so well-known for some people, and that he decided not to worship some of these deities. And so Tibetan Buddhism is a very kind of open thing. They adopted many of these the worship of the demons and spirits and so on, and many Buddhas, a lot of rituals, in other words. A lot of rituals, even black magic if you like. So, of course, not all Tibetan monks do that. Some of them are more serious in their practice. But remember, in Tibet, it's just like the early Roman Church. Politics and religion are mixed together. Even today, you go to Bhutan, some of the regions in Bhutan are ruled by monks. They have their forts, they're called forts, and these monks live there and they actually rule that area. So you can imagine the kind of history they have. You have politicians, kings, then later these religious people also became very powerful. Then they managed, people are more likely to listen to religious people if they have to choose between a religious person and a politician. They fear the religious people more. So the monks became very powerful. So around the, I think, 12th century, the monks in Tibet introduced the idea of the tulku, and that made their power even greater. Because according to the tulku system, monk A dies, and then he's reborn as monk B, and they will look for this, and he takes over his position. So he's basically keeping power within the family. So you find in Tibetan Buddhism, religion and politics are combined. That's another aspect. So the people that you're worshipping, many of the lamas who come, especially the Rinpoches, they are royalty actually. They are royalty. So the question is this: what have I, who am a Singapore Buddhist, got to do with the Tibetan royalty? So when I bow down to him, am I bowing down to royalty or am I bowing down to a monk? Because in my mind, it's very difficult to combine the two, right? So this is my personal view. So we don't need the kind of Buddhism if you feel you're happy with what you have. So in Buddhism, in other words, you have a choice. You want to be a Tibetan Buddhism, you're happy with it, fine, no problem with that. But if you feel that you want to really practice, you want to keep it simple, then it's good to choose the simple one. Don't say, for example, oh, my Buddhism is more powerful than your Buddhism. It's not like that. Okay? Rather, we should look for happiness within ourselves. We look for peacefulness within ourselves. If that system of meditation, whatever country it may come from, gives you inner peace, then you should practice it. Because sooner or later, you'll find that in that peace, you don't need to call yourself any kind of Buddhist, because you have attained the inner peace, and you find you're nearer to Nirvana. That's the important thing. Okay? Anything you're not sure, you can ask, no? Because I'm just speaking generally.
I understand within Tibetan Buddhism there are also 4 schools.
Oh yeah, there are a number of schools, sub-schools, and so on. So many other divisions. After the Chinese took over Tibet, it is those powerful clans, the royal monks, they were the ones who suffered the most. They were the ones that had to run away, because the communist government not too happy with them anyway. The poor are always poor, so it makes no difference to them in a sense. So it's in a sense a difficult situation, because many of the overseas Tibetans want to go back also. Any kind of Buddhism there's a prefix in front of it is much later. You have Chinese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism, and so on. Right? Indian Buddhism is bad enough, you might say. So we should look for Buddhism just like that, or better still look for the Dharma. Because if you say Chinese Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, these are cultural aspects of Buddhism. So today the scholars, they tell you there are, broadly speaking, two kinds of Buddhism in the world. Ethnic Buddhism and convert Buddhism. Ethnic Buddhism, they got this prefix, because people, you're born into it. You know, for example, you might say there is Singapore Buddhism. We are born into this kind of Buddhism in Singapore. Maybe if my children or what, you know. So in Singapore they might say, oh, money is the most important thing, you know. So that's Singapore Buddhism, right? But on the other hand, if you really practice the Buddha's teaching, you don't talk like that. You say peace of mind, right? So ethnic Buddhism usually puts the culture first. They use Buddhism to preserve the culture. Whereas convert Buddhism, people who go to Buddhism, to the Dharma directly, they simply want to know the Dharma, practice it. But you can have both. You can have both. By slowly educating the people around you. The good thing about ethnic Buddhism is that they have roots. So we can slowly train our people, let's say Singapore Buddhists, to rise from merely being ethnic and parochial to become more spiritual, right? Otherwise, you know, for example, you know, when I was in Holland, during one of those Thai holidays, no? Of course, Thai holidays, you get very nice food. The Thai people bring all kinds of nice Thai food in Holland. So, like today, you got big dana here, no? So up to like 12 o'clock, you know, all dana offering, very nice. The Thais are there happy, chatting, laughing, smiling. And then the monk announces, 1 o'clock, we have meditation, 12:30, not a single Thai is seen, all gone, all disappeared. And the Europeans start coming in, the Dutch and the Westerners for meditation. So you see two different cultures, you know, right? So the question now is, can we somehow blend the two, you know? Isn't it nice if the local people also do meditation? And then, of course, by now, the European Buddhists, Western Buddhists also got their own culture already. You got Buddha images with Buddha looking like a European already, right? So Buddhism is becoming global. So in other words, we got to pick the best from both sides and culture that it can happen. So as long as you ask questions, you dare to stand up to things you think are wrong, I think there is hope. If you follow blindly, then of course we end up just like any other religion. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Then find out why you're wrong, right yourself. And if more of you speak up, I think the future is very bright for Buddhism.
Sometimes there's a confused over here. It's a Tibetan and then Theravada.
Yeah.
Some believe that Buddha is already dead and gone and cannot help us. But then to them they say that Guan Yin is around to help. So
Okay. Well, put it this way. Buddhism is like a supermarket, you know. You choose what you want. You choose what you need.
Can we mix up?
Of course, no one's going to stop you from doing that. But you must ask yourself, why do I do this? What do I really need? Okay? In other words, in Buddhism, it's okay for other people, they can believe what they want, but I don't see the need for that kind of belief, so it's okay. Everybody got their needs, everybody got their fears, they got their background. You know, maybe some of them, they have no choice. You know, for example, this Ang Mo has got a girlfriend. This girlfriend brings him to the temple. He's got to follow Thai style, bow like Thai, sit down like Thai. You know, right? So everybody has a choice. We don't have to follow them. In other words, in Buddhism, there are so many choices. You know, you go to the supermarket, you don't have to buy everything. You buy what you need, and more important than that, you use what you need. Don't waste it. Benefit from it. So my principle is very simple. Why don't you keep it simple? You know? So the simpler, the better. Simple means renunciation. That's another way of looking at it. To simplify means to renounce, right? So you must let go more and more of the ideas, let go more and more of the rituals so that you become very peaceful. So peace of mind is the most precious thing in Buddhism. All other things ultimately must lead to this. if this teaching doesn't lead to peace of mind, you can forget about it. It's not a question of who's right, who's wrong. If this thing doesn't bring peace of mind, let go of it. But your needs are different from my needs. Actually, there are only two kinds of Buddhism. Not what this Vada or that Vada. Rather, my Buddhism and your Buddhism. There's only two kinds. My Buddhism is always right, your Buddhism is always wrong. So, so what to do? So the important thing is you practice what you think is right. Don't worry about other people. Be compassionate to them. Show them your loving kindness. And in Buddhism, there's a lot of exchange. The good thing is we don't hurt each other. We don't burn the temple because you are different from us. And that's the good thing. So choose wisely, basically. Of course, learn as much as you can from the kind of Buddhism that you like. And as I said, the most important thing to know about is peace of mind. It's the most important thing. Okay? All right, just nice. On that note, we can end this. So, if you have any new theme, you can email me. If not, we'll select one suitable book for the next round. Now, to save space for this temple, if you want, you can keep this book. Since you're finished with it, take home with you, because you're finished. It's our gift to you. And I'll bring you a new book. All right? All right. Once again, we have completed another sutta book. And we have done tremendous good karma by doing this to our patience and dedication and the peace that is available here. We must work very hard to preserve this peace, this conduciveness, this what I call conducive environment for studying the Dharma, for practicing the Dharma, for keeping in touch with one another happily. These are very precious things we must not take for granted. We must work hard for it, make small sacrifices, be regular and committed in our work towards the Dharma. And then you find as time passes, we all grow old, we all age, then the young will take over. And then they also will follow our example of kindness, of friendship, of wisdom, of dedication. And then you find Buddhism very meaningful in our lives. And there are lots of stories and teachings in the suttas which guide us further on this path of wisdom. Such thoughts are very good thoughts. They are good karma of the mind. By the power of such good mental karma and various other good actions we have done, may we attain peace of mind in this life itself, especially when we meditate. And most important of all, may we attain stream winning in this life itself. In this moment of peace, let us dedicate the merits of this study and various good deeds we have done to the late Madam Cha Tek Kim, who passed away recently. If she is reborn in higher states like the Devas and so on, may she rejoice in her life and shower blessings upon us. If she is born in any suffering states, may her good karma quickly ripen and uplift her from those suffering states. If she is reborn among the departed, we dedicate these merits to her, remembering all the good deeds she has done. May she be well, may she be happy, and quickly be uplifted from that state to be reborn in happier states where the Dharma is available. And may she attain awakening in this life itself. At this moment too, let us share our loving kindness to all those who have been working for this place, for this center, and all our relatives and friends. Even those who are far away from the Dharma, may the Dharma touch them to be happy and kind to one another. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.